Hi Nobugs project audience, and we are here at the IBM JCP meeting. We are here in Hursley, in England, and today we have the honor of having an interview with Ivar. So Ivar is the spec lead of the JSR 371 of the MVC JSR. And he's a Java champion, and also he has a Duke tattoo, and he's highly involved with NetBeans. And well, we will have the honor to be talking to him today. And well, we are going to make him 3 questions. About what is the biggest bug he faced in his life, how did he solve it, and what tip he can leave for us. So, hi Ivar, it's a great honor to have you here.
It's a pleasure.
And well, so the first question is, what was the biggest bug you had in your life?
Okay, so I assume you're asking about code bugs.
Yes.
And not any other bugs. Yeah, I have a hard time actually finding which is the biggest, hardest bug. But usually, the hardest bug to find is the one where the developer has been clever, using some new aspects or new features of the APIs, maybe in a not intentional way. I see that the hardest bug in the code is probably not written yet. It's a future thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's a code that you
I haven't written it yet.
You haven't written.
No.
Mm-hmm.
But the next question you're having, like, how do I fix these bugs or how do I find them? It's the most valuable resource that I'm using is the debugger, and I'm actually kind of surprised how often I come along a developer that doesn't use a debugger. They use system out print lines or use tests or whatever, but when I say just start the debugger and set a breakpoint, I have to explain it again and again. So the single best tip in solving bugs is actually use the tools you have. Yes. All the IDEs have excellent debuggers. Yes. Learn how to use it, set breakpoints, and see what's actually going on. Because guessing is probably the worst thing you can do. You should know what's going on, and the debugger is the best tool for that.
Yes, and if we use the debugger tool effectively, we can realize what's happening in the code, and it's important to remember that the debug is, I think it's the last resort, because the debug is to see what's happening inside the code, and if you have no idea about what's happening, then you use the debugger tool, because sometimes you just see the code and you just know what's happening, and so the debug tool is a very effective way to avoid bugs.
Mm-hmm. Or actually, the debugger is to kind of figure out what's going on. Why is this bug here?
Yes,
to avoid bugs, I would actually recommend using static analysis tools like find bugs or similar tools like SonarQube. Excellent tools for kind of seeing bug patterns in your code.
Yes, and how simple, how tip would you leave to Nobugs project audience about coding best practices? Do you think, for example, that variable names are important? And I don't know, what thing related to code that you find very, very important?
Yeah, you mentioned variable names. I mean, naming is hard, but it's so important. So the best way of avoiding bugs and it's to communicate clearly through your code by let your code the way you write it reflects what you actually want to do. Don't try to be too clever or do things too difficult. Just keep it simple. That would be probably the best.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think it's just technical stuff that impacts in the code quality, or do you think human relations? How do you deal with your team? Do you think it impacts as well in the?
Yeah, definitely. If you're, I mean, if you have a team that don't communicate and you're just sitting by yourself and writing code and figuring out yourself, you may understand the code and it may be good, but if there are something wrong with it, it's probably not you that are going to solve that bug. It's somebody else. So if you collaborate by writing the code, like having some sessions where you sit together, pair program, that's excellent, because then you talk about the code, and if two people understand it, it's more likely that the third people are going to understand it as well.
Yeah, so communication is a big problem, and sometimes we think that we pass the information and the other understood, but sometimes they just don't. And it's important for us to pass the information in a clear way, so that everyone can understand and everyone can work in the same way.
Yes.
So
and another tip that is to be a better coder is actually to participate in open source projects.
Yes.
And do read code that is out there that lots of people are contributing to, because the quality of open source projects are often pretty good.
Yes.
So that's where you learn how to be better, so open source is kind of the best way to learn.
Yes, it's really powerful because you can see the code of the best developers in the world, like Ivar, and you can learn a lot. So it's really powerful, and also you can just see the patterns of the code, and you'll be really strong in code analysis, and also you'll be building a really strong network with the best developers in the world. So this is really important for your career, and also it makes a really good portfolio for you. So it's a really strong tip that Ivar leave here for us. And Ivar, I would like to ask you if you remember if you have in your mind now the worst bug that you had, and how did you solve it? Do you remember? I'm trying, since you mentioned it, I'm trying to figure out what's the worst bug, because all bugs are hard in its own way. But yes.
Yeah.
The bug, for example, that you pass a long time to find out what is happening, and you just don't figure out, and it was really hidden. Or you can say some bug that was simple to solve, and just say for us what is the best way to avoid them. You mentioned about the debug tool,
yeah.
But we would like to know what is the best way to avoid them before they appear.
Yeah, the best way to avoid bugs are write simple code. I mean, if you think if you're trying to do something that it's a little bit too advanced, or using some new features of the language or libraries, you probably are going to write code that is hard to read. And so the important thing is, when writing code, is keep it simple and understand that it's people reading this. The computer will understand whatever you write, but the humans, you need to be clear. You mentioned variables names,
yes.
Method names, splitting things up, keeping things smaller. Like if you have a 2,000 line Java class or something, it's not easy, yes, to figure it out, and all these nested if statements or whatever, or even if you're using newer constructs like the Stream API of Java 8, it's not necessarily always the best thing to use streams. Maybe it's clearer to use to iterate it as you would do before you have the streams API. So just make it clear what you're doing so the person can read it. That's kind of the important thing.
So yeah, it's really powerful. What we can do to avoid bugs before they appear, we have just to keep the code simple and don't repeat ourselves. So if we keep these simple rules in mind, we can make our code really simple to read. And remember, we don't code for the machine, we code for other developers. Because you know the famous quote from Martin Fowler. Is it from Martin Fowler? It is. Any fool can write a code that machine can understand, and good programmers write code that developers can understand. So it's a really powerful phrase, and it's true. If we just code for the machine, it's easy. Everyone can do this. But the difficult part is to write code for other developers, is to write high quality software. And everyone wins with it. The company, you, because you'll be understanding what's happening in the code. And we software developers know that the most time that we spend maintaining the code is when the code is ready. So we just spend more time with legacy code, with code that was wrote already. So not with new codes. So if we put more effort when we are writing a new code with quality, we won't be wasting a lot of our time to find out what's happening, and bugs are really a huge problem. And if you didn't write a good code, it will be a long time just to find out what happened, because bad code, nobody wants it. We know, software developers, that it's a nightmare to maintain a bad code. So this was a really powerful tip for us, Ivar, and again, it's a high honor to have you here in No Bugs Project, and I'm sure that the No Bugs Project audience will learn a lot with you. And I really appreciate your presence here, and hope to see you again.
Thank you. Hope to see you again too. So.
Okay, so bye-bye, No Bugs Project audience, and see you the next time.